Teachers of Reddit, what was the best prank a student pulled on you that you weren't even mad about? 2 students stole my stapler and tried to do the jello thing with it, which, I admit, I would have laughed at. But the idiots put the jello in the freezer so it would set faster. All it did was freeze the water, which promptly melted all over my classroom's floor. I laughed my butt off as they frantically tried to clean it all up and explain. I really hope that this translated into a teachable moment in their science class. Would nearly make up for the lack of home economics in schools these days. A student brought in a huge watermelon, dumped it on my coworker's desk and said they were out of apples. It was so random, and we all got a big kick out of it. You gotta work with what you have, man. And I mean, think about how many doctors that will keep away. I wish I had a good story to tell. I prank them way more than they prank me. My students' version of pranking me is to ask me, hey, do you know the word responsible? Spell it and then be very very sad when I spell out IT. Child, I wasn't born yesterday. I was teaching a large group of students in Mexico. Someone raised their hand and asked, is it pronounced Murant or Murants? Roughly translated, go die. I was confused because I didn't understand what it had to do with the subject. So I repeated the question. Everybody, like 80 students, then dropped dead on the floor. I was impressed with the fact they coordinated it, but seeing as they botched their own prank, I just rolled my eyes and kept teaching. A teacher took a cell phone from a student, opened the ceiling tile and tossed the phone so that it was above the neighboring classroom. Then all day people would call the phone and the teacher next door went insane trying to find where the noise was coming from. Bet the teacher next door punched a hole in the wall. This was the roles reversed. It was this one student's birthday and it was during homeroom. The teacher yelled at him and made him bring his phone over. The teacher never gets mad, so it scared all of us. When the student brought over his phone, the teacher told him to open the cabinet next to him and put it in there. When he opened it, there were cupcakes and the teacher then told him happy birthday and handed out cupcakes. That's nice. If it's okay, I was a student at the time, but I know I can speak for my teacher as I know him to this day and he remembers it fondly. If we ever asked our teacher something about the lesson that was incorrect, he would respond with, if you believe that then it says gullible on the ceiling. One day he stepped out of class for a minute and a bunch of us taped a piece of paper with gullible written on it on the ceiling above his desk. Then we waited. When the time eventually came, he tried so hard to not be amused by it, but he laughed about it for a while and left it up there till the end of the school year. Now I'm thinking about the Asked videos. Due to a teacher's health issue and need to take the rest of the year off, I was hired at an odd time of the year, around mid-April. The district had its own phone system, as many of them do, where each classroom has a phone, but most of them can only make internal calls. The first time I went to use the phone in my room, I picked up the receiver and got nothing. Upon closer inspection, I saw there was no cord connecting the phone to the receiver. It wasn't an emergency, so I just shrugged it off. During my next break, I went to the main office and said, this might sound a little weird, but the phone in my room doesn't have a cord. All the secretaries sighed in unison and one told me that a group of kids disconnected nearly every phone in the building by taking the receiver cords as an April Fool's Day prank. They were nice enough not to fully steal the cords, just left the pile somewhere, but someone still had to reconnect all of them, and apparently my classroom was missed. I tried not to show it, but I did laugh a little, because it was one of the more creative pranks I'd heard about. I'm the teacher that spearheaded the prank, but it is funny so I'll tell it. There is a cartoon called Brittany Meets Harriet Tubman and the theme song is awful and an earworm. I showed it in my media center in February every year and one teacher had to come in with 2 different 3rd grade classes. I loved her. She was awesome, so she got to hear it twice each year. Last Christmas I got one of the 2 classes she taught to pull a caroling prank. I learned the theme song on the piano and recorded it, and my assistant and I made up red and green carol books with the words to the theme song on it. I gave the CD with me playing the piano and song words books to the other 3rd grade teacher and we practiced once quietly. They practiced on their own. On the last day before the winter break during the parties, I had the class line up and a student knocked on the teacher's door and asked if they could sing a carol. The teacher said sure and let him in. The boombox had jingle bells playing as we entered. Then I hit the next track button on the CD player and Brittany, she wants to know about her history started and the kids sang their hearts out and the teacher play acted being all upset. The best part was that the kids did not leak a word about it. I was shocked. I thought they would leak the prank. It was awesome. I had a small group of sophomore boys hide a handful of Easter eggs in my room one year. There was also a school-wide staff Easter egg hunt that the boys knew nothing about, so I expected to find one egg in my room. Then I kept finding them. The boys asked me if I found them all, and me, being totally clueless and thinking it was still the staff Easter egg hunt, told them that I had and that I was pretty sure the Easter bunny messed up because I was only supposed to have one. Then they asked, "Are you sure you found them all?" and I repeated, emphatically, that I had. At that point, the tallest boy reached up and popped off one of the ceiling tiles to reveal a giant golden egg they had hidden earlier. They were also proud of themselves for stumping me, saying things like, "Dude, she didn't find it," and high-fiving each other. I loved how simple and wholesome the whole thing was. The other day I had to leave 12 female 9th graders in the classroom alone for like 3 minutes tops. I jokingly told them to be good when I left because I knew they weren't going to do anything besides sit there and talk. When I came back they had turned as many things upside down in my room as they could. Desks, chairs, stuff on my desk, a microwave, trash cans. It was funny because it didn't harm anything and I wasn't expecting them to do anything ornery when I was gone. They were so proud of themselves, couldn't stop giggling. Our Spanish teacher left the room for 5 minutes and so we flipped all the desks upside down. We were so proud and awaited his surprise response. He just walked back in and calmly said, "Oh, now turn them back over," and went back to looking at some papers. Not the teacher, but my boyfriend once colluded with 2 classmates to bring a blender, milk, and some other ingredients to school and started making a smoothie in the middle of English class. This is a power move. Me and the gym teacher, new teachers, have to give the puberty talk to 56th grade boys. Halfway through we give them note cards to ask us anonymous questions. Most of them are about zits and boners, but there are a few like, why is my dong 11 inches and how do I get girls to give me BJs? Needless to say we had to go through the pile quickly to weed out the ones we weren't going to answer. So as I'm flipping through the pile, I come across his doggy style fun. I'm trying not laugh. Toss the card, grab the next one. Why'd cows moo? I burst out laughing and suddenly a group of boys in the back loses it, laughing so hard. Confused, I flip over the card. They had scribbled all over the back so they would know I was reading their card while I was going through them. How little suckers. Thank God none of them thought to do that to one of the dirty ones though. My first year teaching, there was a kid who was a really great drummer and beatboxer. One day in the middle of a test, he starts softly laying down a beat. I gave him a look, but he was too far into it and got louder. It was a really recognizable song. So another kid starts doing the keyboard part. Eventually the whole class is doing an amazing a cappella of Salt and Pepper's Push It. I couldn't be mad. To this day, 17 years later, it's one of the best things that's happened in my class. Our English teacher said something by accident that resulted in the rest of the class to sing Bohemian Rhapsody. It was awesome. During a 7th grade health class, while I stepped out for a second, students grabbed my CPR mannequin and quickly threw a coat and hat on him, then sat him up in a seat. Then had the nerve to keep a straight face while I had trouble keeping mine. I lost it laughing. God freaking dang it. Not a teacher but a student. My teacher called me Doug for the first 2 months of class or so. My name isn't Doug. I thought at first he was saying dog like as a joke, trying to be all hipster. But I kind of thought it was funny so I never corrected him. A girl in my class eventually told him and so he stopped calling me Doug. Unless he wanted to prank me. Then one day I got bored in class so I started zoning out. I sat in the front of the class so he noticed this quickly. "Douglas, please focus." I actually responded, "XD sorry Mr. Well." The class broke up and laughed till Mayo. TLDR, my math teacher called me Doug by mistake, and now I respond to the name. Not the teacher, but a student in class which participated in several April Fool's jokes. First, before recess, Our class discussed with the next door class to swap classrooms for the lesson right after our recess break. We carried it out perfectly, and when both teachers realized they couldn't stop laughing, our teachers were cool too and just carried on the lesson like nothing changed. The teacher then realized that we did not take the subject biology, so she ended up just showing us YouTube videos till the end. Second, for our final lesson, geography, on the same day, we turned our tables 90 degrees to face the hallway and locked the doors. Our geography teacher was the coolest and chillest guy we know, so we went all out. When he couldn't open the door, he looked through the window to see us all facing him in the hallway. He couldn't believe his eyes. So, as the smart and quick thinking teacher he was, he started teaching us from outside. LOL. Only lasted for like 10 minutes before it became a nuisance for both the teacher and the students, so we gave up and unlocked the door. I know some teachers that would start teaching from outside. Not a teacher, but in my junior college abnormal psych class we got to the room and it said on the board the teacher was going to be late, so we erased it, wrote class cancelled, and migrated to the room across the hall. She got to class, stormed off, and eventually came back to find us all in the room like nothing happened. I teach 11th grade English and always assign seats to help me learn names because I mix them up so bad. These 3 boys picked up on that and started switching seats and names. It took me a couple days before I figured it out. Arranged for a phone message to be left for my bio teacher, a call from Mr. Leon. Teacher wasn't familiar with the name, but on his next free period he called the number from the school office. Pre-cell phone era, he knew he'd been pranked as soon as the person on the other end answered the phone. Philadelphia Zoo, how may I direct your call? Should have let him ask for Raf. My old biology teacher had a crap load of plants in her classroom. One of my classmates planted a weed seed in one of her pots and she didn't notice until it was big enough to recognize that it was weed. She chuckled it off. My dad, who happened to later become a teacher, and his friends brought in a toaster on their last day of senior year and started making Pop-Tarts in his physics class. Teacher got really mad but couldn't do anything because they were graduating high school later that day. I had one of those daily calendars with pictures of cats and I hadn't been pulling off the days. Somehow, without me noticing, they pulled off all the days until they got to the current date, cut out all the cats, and taped them all around my computer monitor. At the end of the day I finally sat down to be greeted by a halo of cats. I laughed until I cried and left up my cat halo for the rest of the year. Best prank ever. Not the best prank really, but I just wanted to share because I'm so glad this joke is still around. One of my 3rd graders asked if I like pizza. Me, yes. Him, do you love pizza? Me, knowing exactly where this is going. Sure do. Love it. Him, then why don't you marry it? Insert wholesome laughter from the whole group because they got me. So far I've married pizza, mac and cheese, Vincent van Gogh, tacos, my tennis shoes, and stuffed pig because I fall for it every time. Not really a prank on me, but my students, 16-17-year-old lads, had an ongoing joke where if someone told a terrible joke they would take a dive and the others in the class would put their hands together and pretend to do a little dive into their desks while giving the person grief for telling such a bad joke. You know, typical teenage guy stuff. Cut to last class on a Friday. That one awkward kid in the class, let's call him Alan, tries to tell a joke and absolutely bombs. Silence. It was so awkward that none of the other students even attempted to slag him. I kind of chuckle politely because I feel bad and turn to the board to get on with the lesson when all of a sudden a student shouts at me, "Stop." He jumps out of his seat and begins to rummage through his bag furiously while the rest of the class, myself included, are looking at him absolutely baffled. He then produces a swimming hat and a pair of goggles, proceeds to put them on, stand up on his chair and goes full Olympic diver, hands out to the side, face looking at the ceiling, and here comes Alan stepping up to the 10-meter board for his final jump. He then mock dives onto the floor before jumping up and shouting, "Comma, and it's a perfect 10. Alan has done it." I had to walk out of the classroom for a full minute because I couldn't stop myself laughing. The commitment to bring in the full swim gear was excellent. Underrated comment. Not the teacher, and he did get mad. I was a band kid, and every year the seniors in band would pull a harmless prank on the band director. As a senior, we had a brand new band director who was younger and cooler, and not an alcoholic, than our last one. But he also had a temper, so we do the prank. We wrapped his truck in plastic wrap, formed the chairs in the band hall into the number 13 for our graduating class signature, but the kicker was his office, covered in balloons and glitter. Glitter was everywhere, thanks to one meek trumpet player who shall not be named. Thanks, Rogue. Anyway, I went about my evening with a friend before the graduation ceremony was to start. I didn't have a cell phone at the time, never consistently had one as a teen. Single parent home, very little spending money, so I didn't receive the texts from the angry director who'd sent them out to the band kids. Something to the effect of, clean it up now, and other things I can't remember. I arrived at graduation with the other band seniors asking me if I'd gotten the texts and where I'd been for the cleanup. I reminded everyone that I didn't have a phone, no big deal, couldn't have known. I was shocked at how upset he was. Fast forward to my walk, shaking hands with hugging teachers, get a band director, he hugs me, curtly says congrats. I tell him I didn't know about the texts. He squints his eyes and practically spits, don't lie to me. I was pretty hurt. I really liked him. He made senior year of band even better than band already was. And now he thought I was a liar and that I was lazy and avoiding responsibility. I never saw or heard from him again, moved away from my tiny town by the following summer. It still hurts when I think about what he thought of me and probably still thinks of me. I was a dang good bass clarinetist and a smart kid. All ruined over some freaking glitter. Thanks, Rogue. Harmless prank. Glitter. Choose one. This was a prank on another student. This one student would fall asleep in his desk every day. He would just cross his arms, lower his chin, and he'd be out. One day a group of kids quietly picked up his desk, took him to the elevator, and quietly walked him down to the principal's office. Then with a loud AHM the principal woke him up. He was so shocked. I don't believe that a group of high schoolers could pick up a desk containing a sleeping teenager without waking him up. I'm a student, but last week my teacher pulled the best prank on all of us. We get to class and he immediately hands out exam packets about the book we had just finished reading. We were all very confused but didn't know how to react, so we just all sat there like freaking retards. After about 2-3 minutes of reading over some of the questions, we all realized just how detailed they were and no one knew how to answer any of the questions. Then, this one very smart student who literally has never gotten any grade below an A starts to burst into tears. Keep in mind we are 17 years old. Then our teacher felt bad, so he told us it was just a prank and we all just took a deep breath and laughed it off. See? During students teaching I was quieting a bunch of 9th graders when one of them did the countdown from 5. I asked him to stop, but at 0 everybody tossed up their pencils to clatter on the floor. Simple, cute, and I couldn't stop smiling. They are ready to graduate already. Monday we are all going to take our shoes off and when we enter the classroom. Last Friday a friend yelled stampede and everyone stomped really loud for 5 seconds. Spanish class with sophomores and juniors. My philosophy teacher always played mini pranks on us. He is one of my favorite teachers. We decides to prank him back. We had a work period. He left the classroom. Someone spoke up and said every time he talks just start laughing. He comes back and he just mumbles something and we all burst laughing. So for about 15 minutes straight, he's going absolutely crazy because he wants to know what's funny and if we played a prank on him. He's not mad or upset but having a good time. Those were good times. In high school there was a teacher no one liked. She was old and bitter. We had 4 blocks a day instead of class periods, over an hour in class. Every block coordinated a prank. Every 15 minutes the class would drop their pencil. I was in first block and she was confused and slightly irritated by the end. By the end of the day she flipped and threatened everyone with detention. When I was a student my maths teacher was explaining functions. He was saying how you could express just about anything as a function in the form of f, x, and spent a few minutes writing down random examples on the board. I put my hand up pretending to not understand and asked, could you have a function of something like u plus ck? To which he replied absolutely and promptly wrote f. U plus CK on the board. A few people got it and laughed, and it took the teacher a second, but he caught on too. He laughed as well, said he'd never thought of that and loved it. He was a cool guy. F U plus CK equals foo plus FCK, which translates into frick you plus frick. One time in band class the teacher pranked us all. It was a rule that we weren't supposed to have phones out, but everyone did it, and occasionally he said something, but there were never any real consequences. So this one day, we were in band playing music as usual when he just got pee out of nowhere and picked up a phone off a girl in the front row stand and started yelling about how he was tired of being disrespected, and he threw the phone at the wall so hard it shattered and the back came off. Turns out it was a decoy phone and the girl was in on it, but he didn't tell us that until the next week. But for the rest of that week no one was on their phones at all. Not a teacher but the student who pulled the prank. So basically she was a laid-back English professor where I went to college, and she had finished telling us about this story about ghosts. She's a strong believer, or something, that happened at her house. She basically felt that she was being followed by this presence. I sat far away from her, so I opened up a Word document and typed "we're coming for you" over and over again, and had it sent to the in-room printer. The printer comes to life, and since we had no reason to be using the printer, her face went pale. She looks at the paper and she says, "Oh frick number," at which point myself and the guy next to me start laughing our asses off. She told us to frick off as everyone else, including herself, started laughing as well. 6th grade class all got together to roll my new white truck on my 40th birthday. They kept it quiet and didn't involve any teachers, except asking a teacher if they could do it while I was in class. The PE teacher told me I needed to go take a look at my vehicle. Apparently there was a lot of concern that I would go postal over it. I just laughed and said good job and cleaned it off before I drove it home. I left it so everyone could see it. It was non-destructive and easy to clean up, and said a lot that they used their own money to do it. Even more that no one spilled the beans. A few years ago I had to leave the room for a few minutes. When I came back I knew something was different, but I couldn't put my finger on what. About 5 minutes passes, and then I realized that everyone had flipped their seat. Everyone who normally sat on the left side of the room was on the right, and vice versa. My class is in a U configuration. It took some serious quick thinking to get it all figured out so quickly. 11th grade English by the way. We were doing a coloring project one of the last days of school. One of my 5th graders said, "Wouldn't it be funny if someone took all the purple markers?" Sure enough, setting up my classroom that fall, all of them are gone. I can't even be mad about it. He pretty much told me he was going to do it. I was subbing for a high school biology class and a kid made a tiny fireball out of a battery or something. Obviously I had to write him up because fire in class, but I was so impressed he could do that, lol. My son and his friend hid a radio transmitter, battery and Raspberry Pi in a disused locker, and set it out broadcast over the school tannoy system. Over the space of several weeks it played a susurration that started inaudibly and very gradually increased, with the result that people became aware of it at very different times to each other. I'm not a teacher, but the kid pulling it off. She told me several years later it was the so far funniest joke someone had pulled off in her class. Well, long story short, it was in the middle of an exam and she wanted to start correcting the first ones she already got by some of us students. I was standing at her desk at that moment, and being one of those funny guys, had a pen with a AA battery in it, short-circuiting through your finger as soon as you tried to click it. She did, screaming by surprise and throwing the pen to the other side of the classroom. Go old times. Not to be a party pooper, but if you're going to prank someone it should be harmless, even with the exclaimer there. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.